Welcome to the Failing Up podcast. Today we're talking to Kenny Sallis. He talks to us a little bit about your word is your bond and what that means to him. And that there's beauty in ignorance, right? Being able to go forward and conquer, and the importance of family and how we can really reflect on what it is that we want to do and be present in those moments. So come dive in with us.
All right, let's hop in. Welcome back to another episode of the Failing Up podcast, humble lessons in life and business. Here with my amazing co-host, Dusty Oglesby. Dusty, thanks for being here, man.
It's good to be back. Nashville, it's the one place I come where I just feel like I'm in Texas all over again, man. I don't have to change the way I talk. Everybody understands me.
I was thinking you said that to one, and I don't know that my wife has ever made a picture of sweet tea. And I go like, we've been here like 20 something years. I've failed her as a Southern gentleman.
Come on, man.
Of teaching her how to make Mammy sweet tea. My Mammy just passed away a couple of weeks ago. I was at her funeral.
Yeah.
And we were all talking about like, what do you remember the most? And I remember like the yellow Tupperware thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was mostly sugar.
Oh yeah.
Right. And just a little tea in there.
Yeah.
It was that, and it was her mac and cheese. But
did you do the sun tea thing? We did that when I was growing up. My mom would take it, put it out
in the window.
She put it like outside, man. We people
like flies in it.
We had tea outside. Pretty sure she had a lid on it. I don't know. I just remember thinking when I was a kid, like, why is our tea outside? Who does that? Sun tea.
There you go. That's good right there. Yeah.
Come on.
Awesome. Well, also joining us today for this episode is the amazing Kenny Sallis. Kenny, take a moment, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yes. So Kenny Sallis, we are a part of Keller Williams. Sallis Realty Group just started that mega agent office. What's that been? 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, something like that. So that's been a cool deal. Been in real estate for 5.5 years now, almost 6. Before real estate, I was a high school football coach, special ed teacher, and loved it. I mean, it was great. It was what I wanted to do. It was everything we always, me and my wife always wanted. My wife Kelly was a nurse practitioner. Player, right? Yeah. Kelly's in the her high school Hall of Fame. She was a Division I golfer, full scholarship, all that. I played. Yeah. She was a stud. She actually just 2 weeks ago won our club championship, and she's a golfer. And I think that's the only time she's played this year. She's played like 3 times in the last 3 years.
I got a hole in one at the putt-putt up in Boston.
Congrats.
When I was there.
Gotta be rough to not play at all, go out and win the club championship.
Oh, dude. I mean, her and her sister are like around Lebanon, where we're from. They're legends. Like they're at the country club. Like they're
I almost invited
everybody
her
knows
instead
them.
of you. I was like, Kelly would have been awesome, right?
It's cool that we got Kelly's caddy though. That's cool.
Everybody's right. Kelly's caddy. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I mean, and people will be like, "Oh, does she beat you?" Yeah, it's like that's not a thing. Like, does she? Yes,
that's right.
There won't be a day ever where that it's a whole different level.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, brother. The idea here, we as our guests are kind of getting into a rhythm, has been around failure, right, and around being really transparent. Not so much about what makes you amazing, what makes you awesome, and why you're so successful at what you do, but around the failure that got you here and how you've used that as a catalyst, the ways that you've investigated and seen it show up. So we'd love to start the show by asking, what does failure mean to you? How do you define it? How does it show up in your world when you think of failure? What does that mean?
That's a tough one when you. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and it was one of my real estate coaches, and it was about the things that make me nervous or make me anxious or worry me, and I guess that's a big sense of failure. Kind of goes in the same thing, and for me, it's when somebody's relying on me or counting on me or waiting on me to do something, and I haven't done it yet, or I can't do it, or I don't know what I'm doing. I can't figure it out. So that to me, it's that sense that drives me to make sure I know about X, Y, and Z, because it would scare me to death. And just if someone thought that I wasn't doing right by them, or I didn't know what I told them I knew, or something like that. So that's the failure that for me really, really worries me. And so it keeps me sharp, or it keeps me driving to know more or learn more or figure that thing out, because it would just break my heart if someone said, yeah, that's Kenny. He did this on purpose. He knowingly didn't tell me this or something like that. So that's the failure for me, is the fear there.
Yeah. I think it's just knowing you, right? You and I had a chance to get to know each other over the last 2 years or so. You see that show up, and I think it is representative of somewhat of like Lebanon and who you are, right? Did you grow up in Lebanon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I moved to Lebanon when I was 8.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's home for sure.
And so it's this small town feel of, one of the things we've talked about with Level 8 is it's still important to us that like our word means something, right? That we're in business with high integrity people that, that when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it because of just kind of how we were raised.
Yeah.
Right? And then you see, I hate that I see that deterioration of your word is your bond type thing around the world. So many people seem to have forgotten like how important it is to do what you say that you're going to do.
Yeah. Right. And that's the way. You said that a lot better than I tried to, but yeah, I mean, it's so important. And to me, it's, if I don't uphold that, then my team wouldn't, and then my family wouldn't, and then our town wouldn't.
Yeah.
And not that that's not true, but
it is a little true.
It might be, because if I don't, then you don't, and we don't, and then and then now we're just this town.
Our community deteriorates.
Yeah, we're just this big city that's not this tight thing that we all try to do the right thing.
I think that's the importance of it, because we live in a day and age where that's not the norm, right? Like not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's almost these days you expect people to not follow through or not be who they say they're going to be. And so I think when we step into that space and how we got here is because that became the norm, right? It used to be the norm that, I think about like my granddad, right? He used to always tell me, like, if I say it, you can take it straight to the bank.
Right. And
I knew that my whole life. There was no question about that, right? Like Reuben Rouse said he was going to do it. Yep. He was going to do it, right? That was, and that's what it looked like. And I can see that being a sense of failing, right? If we're not doing that. Absolutely.
So where do you see that show up for you? I mean, you obviously have this drive, right? And some of that drive, it sounds like, see it in other similar people or successful people, is this drive to not want to disappoint those around you. And so where do you think that comes from, or where do you see that showing up week in and week out for you?
It probably goes, I bet a lot of it goes back to, so you asking these questions are funny, because it's just not the way I think typically. Yeah. I just kind of go, and I'm really not scared to fail. Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing for me. And maybe I'm too dumb to worry about things. I don't know. Yeah. But just do this next thing and start this business, or start this one and start this one. I don't know. It just doesn't scare me to.
Well, what do they call that?
Fail.
The something's curse, right? Like like when you know everything, you now all have these reasons of why not to do it, right? And, and one of the things I learned is studying my father-in-law, who's one of the first successful people I got to know closely, is it wasn't like a intelligence thing that made him successful. In fact, he did some things, and I was like, I don't even think he thought that through. And because he didn't think it through, he then wasn't scared to do it. And then all of a sudden, like statistically, you're going to actually do some things well.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And he just did such a good job of it. And I go like, how do you put on those blinders sometimes? Right. And so I think what you're saying there of it's not a that you don't know, right? It's just that you're willing to go out and take the risk, knowing that statistically there's some consequences that maybe they happen, maybe they show up, but more than likely probably not, especially if you're well educated, or if you're looking or trying to see around corners to all the possible solutions.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also have kind of an optimistic mindset, just sort of naturally. Yeah. So especially those things, like I see potential, and okay, let's just go, because real estate was that for me. I loved what I was doing, teaching and coaching. The way I got in, we flipped our first house, my wife and I, unintentionally. We just kind of, again, that was another thing. We didn't know how to do renovation projects. We just sort of didn't like the kitchen floor. I don't know what's the worst that's going to happen. We don't like it. So let's tear it up and then try to put something new down. So, and so it went from there, and then we sold the house and made a little money, again, unintentionally, bought some land because we had this big idea. I don't know how this would ever work on a teacher's salary, but we had this big idea that we were going to buy this land, build a barn dominium, and then build this big house one day. We're going to live in this one house while we build the other house. Yeah. What world does that? But we just didn't even think about it. Just like, that's what we're going to do
on a lot of land.
When, and it was just that, this is what we're going to do. And so when getting out of teaching, it was sort of the same thing. And I walked in, it wasn't the greatest ending. But so I walk in and I tell them, hey, I'm not going to be coming back next year. And they sort of knew that ahead of time. And he says, well, what are you going to do? Because I'll just say it, he blackballed me from a job that I was going to take. So he says, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'll figure it out. He's like, well, what? And I said, I don't know. I'll cut grass. I'll do handyman work. I'll figure it out.
Whatever it takes.
And and so it just turned out real estate was a thing we're going to try. And so I guess that was just not. It worked that time.
Willing to put willing to go out and take the risk. Probably one of the bigger pieces that has to get overcome if somebody wants to go out and be successful, right? It's the fear of failure more than the failure itself. And so if you can look at it and go, okay, I'm not so much worried about the mistakes I'm going to make. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge that I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm going to go ahead and embrace those mistakes. And I'm going to see what I learn from it. And tuning out the haters, right? Turning out the people that are going to blackball you and who are going to have an opinion on everything that you do. And being able to go, okay, well, I made a mistake. Whatever everybody else wants to say. What can I learn from this? How can I get up and pick on? Did you all, as a football coach, though, you had to see it show up. Confidence to me plays so much into someone's ability to ignore the risk, right? Mm-hmm. And you had to see it as a football coach, right? Where that confidence isn't there initially, but then you see success.
That was a big thing for me. I was a really big weight room guy. That was really important to me, and that's how I was taught when I was playing. That's where it started, and because you can see changes, it's you see them, they show up, and then all of a sudden, kid's a sophomore, then he's a junior, and he's a lot stronger, and obviously he's bigger and older and all that stuff too. But you see these things happen and change. Yeah. So I was always big on that, but I knew what I was doing in football. I knew what I was doing from I never questioned it. And so with that came fear of changing, fear of doing something different. Sure. Can the kids do this? Can this, and so that's where fear absolutely would kind of stop me, because let's not do this because it's a little too aggressive or it's a little too this or that. So I think when I started in real estate, and now as we start some different things, there's a little bit of beauty in ignorance. Yeah. And not having, I don't think I know too much to go fail or to go do this. Because if I fail, well, I didn't know what I was doing in the first place. Of course I did.
That was my dating strategy.
Yeah, right. So it's not, I think it's the ability to just kind of let loose and just go try it, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, whatever.
Yeah, it's having that, I think it's where you call it optimism, faith, and going, hey, one of the things my dad always taught me, when I would come up with when I would have a tough decision in front of me, is he would say, hey, three things are always really true. God loves you, your mom and dad love you, and the sun's going to come up tomorrow. So he's like, you can blow it, and those three things are still going to happen. Yeah. And so it gave me confidence, right, to go, well, let's go do that. Yeah. And if it blows up, right, to your point, I'm like, we'll learn from it, or I didn't really know where we were going. I was going to do it anyway, right?
I saw something last night. Funny enough, I think it was on Instagram. But it said, I'm going to butcher it now. Oh, no, but it said, I'm finally at a place in my life where I don't get upset when things don't go my way, because it obviously wasn't God's plan in the first place.
That's right.
And when you can get to that point, and I'm not saying I'm there by any means, but that really stuck with me last night when I saw that, because it just thought, yeah. And it's funny that we're here today doing this, because it doesn't really matter.
Right.
I mean, it goes wrong. And as long as we didn't intentionally make a decision that was harming people or wronging people, we messed up.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
There's some solace in the fact that, I think God does put in things that were put on our heart. I think I learned this in Bold, right? That if it's put on your heart, there's some force that wants you to pursue that, right? Like it didn't just create itself out of nothing, right?
No,
and so when you have those thoughts and those desires or those, things of going to do something, you can stop and think like, well, this was put on my heart for a reason. It's at least worth investigating, right? Two of the things I heard you say, I think those lessons and what you said about being a football coach was one, you were helping these boys progress as football players, but you knew it, right? And I used to love, Diana would say to us, if you're not confident in yourself, you can borrow my confidence in you until you're confident enough.
That's right.
And having that champion by your side, be it a father or a friend or a coach or whoever that mentor is, to be able to believe in you, even probably a lot of times when you may not believe in yourself.
That's right.
That's how we pass confidence along in this society, right? It's how we pass it along to our children. That's how we stand there and champion by their side. Like, I'll be confident in you if you don't have that confidence.
That's right.
And then the willingness as a leader to turn around and help the next person in line, right? To once you knew, right, being able to turn around and kind of give back to those boys. I think that's pretty powerful, right? It's a great lesson as you're kind of growing.
Yep.
So think about this. Think about a time in the last few years that maybe you were in a tough spot, right? Maybe you were failing at something, or it didn't feel real good. You knew you kind of had a point of recognition that you had failed, but now looking back, you can kind of go like, I see why that happened on my journey. I didn't know it at the time, but that failure led me to this. Yeah.
So I've thought about this a lot. It's funny. It was this first came up for me in Bold. The first time I did Bold, it was my first year teaching, first year coaching. There was all these things that were truly not right. But I'm 23 years old. I'm not right about everything. I don't have all the answers. And looking back, I really pushed way too hard on some things. And ultimately it went terribly. I'm fine with it because it was, again, it's fine, but it went terribly. And I didn't need to be so bold about how I was going about some things. And looking back, it just devastated me because it was this job that I wanted and all this stuff, and it didn't happen, didn't work out. I couldn't believe it. I just absolutely couldn't believe it. And then looking back, like, well, I learned from that I've really got to settle down sometimes. I've really, there are people that are older and more experienced. And while it might not seem that they have everything figured out at the time when you're young, all of a sudden you get a little older and you start realizing experience is real, even if you don't see it when you're young. And that's just it's always been really hard for me to see people being patient and being passive. And I say passive, it may be that it's patient. Yeah. And a lot of times to me, that seems like being passive and letting things happen and not being in action and going for it. And so that's something for me that I've really had to learn is it's not always a go do something right now. Sometimes you have to let people figure things out for themselves. You have to sit back and be patient and let the plan play out and that kind of thing. And that's really hard for me.
I think that's, if we have younger listeners listening to this, right, it's all the little things. And some of them are just small idioms or sayings that we hear. As you get older, you realize like how true those things are. And I don't think we've figured out a great way to teach those lessons because experience is just such a great teacher. Mm-hmm. And so just again, as a father, I can tell my child, I'm like, oh, I wish somebody would have just shook me when I was your age and just made this a thing that I knew. Yeah. And yet you can't do it. You have to go through it yourself.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. I would sit there. It was the football team was so important to me when I was coaching. And so I'm the first one there. I'm the last one that leaves. Almost every day, almost every year I coached. And I just couldn't understand why everybody else wasn't and why any coach would leave that locker room when there was still a kid there. was crazy to me. Like, these are our guys. These are the most important things in the world. And now you have kids and go, well, he wasn't, that guy who used to leave 30 minutes after practice, after he said goodbye to everybody and did what he needed to do and cleaned up and all this stuff.
Yeah.
There was no reason for him to stay for another hour and a half. He's got kids at home.
That's right.
And that's what's important along with these kids.
Yeah.
But to me, you can get so wrapped up in being so all in that you can't see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And,
I think
experience is the only way to learn that for me.
And I don't know if it's just a male thing. I think our egos get in the way of a lot when we're younger, right? And somewhere we all learn that you can hear what you're saying, even though you're not given the details, but it is that ego gets in the way of ourselves, right? And at some point we have to learn that lesson the hard way. Yeah. And so, some people might not have learned that lesson. There's some people out there that are 50, 60, 70 maybe that haven't been knocked on their tail a few times. Okay, but in summary, the other thing that I wanted to touch on, though, what you were saying is we see it a lot in our industry. Good's the enemy of great, right? And when you're starting out, you don't have the success, so you don't have the fear of loss, right? But as you become more and more successful, you now know, and as much as you want to say maybe that you don't do it, all of us have this pride piece where like we want to look good and be right. Right. And so it's like now I'm expected as the broker and the owner and the franchisee and the team leader and the mega agent to know all this stuff. And so you stop asking questions somewhere along the way, right? You stop being curious. I love the story Gary tells about going to a seminar and someone's like, why are you here? Right. And it's just his thirst for knowledge, right? Wanting to learn. Where do you see that? Where do you see it, Dusty? Do you see a show as good as the enemy of great, where people take their foot off the pedal because they're now scared of losing what they've built more than pursuing what they're after? Yeah, well, I think the fear sets in of. I don't know if people talk about a fear of success. I think it's people get afraid of the results of the success, meaning like now all the things all the uncontrollables that go into that, right? Like one thing people don't see when we look at people that are successful is you don't see all the things that are uncontrollable, right? Mm-hmm. But they've chosen to step into those things anyway. And I think we get afraid of all the uncontrollables. And I think it goes back to a fear of failure ultimately. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that's where we end up is, well, what if I'm not able to go to the next? And so then we actually self-sabotage. I mean, this is one of the things we coach on all the time, right? Brianna Weiss in her book, The Mountain Is You, the whole thing is about we self-sabotage our own success because, and you can fill in the blank, right, of why we do that. And yet we self-sabotage our own success. It goes back to even what you were talking about at the age of 23, right? As you were talking, I was thinking how different our perception changes, right? as we get older, right? Because you were there going, how can these guys possibly leave this locker room? Like these guys are the most important people on the planet. Mm-hmm. Well, they left that locker room because they had 2 or 3 kids at home that were the most important people on the planet. Mm-hmm. And now that you have that, you go, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense, right? So our perception's different. And so, but I think ultimately it is a fear of failure that keeps us from taking that next step forward. And so, and I think the reason we don't go from good to great is that great cost. Yeah. It just does. Yeah. You're a lot more willing to fight for food when you don't have food. That's right. Versus when you have food, steak dinner versus mac and cheese, right? It still satisfies. So that's right. So wrapping this, that was a horrible analogy, by the way. It was, the whole, I'm hungry. I like both of those things for the record. They go together well. I know they're both satisfied. Too, like the good to great thing is tough because what made us good in this industry is not the thing that then makes you great. Get you there. Yeah, that's right. That's really hard to figure. Yeah, I mean, it's not getting better at what you do. That's where you see the most successful people. It's just this thirst for the challenge, right? Mm-hmm. And that can almost be unhealthy to some extent. We're running out of time. I want to make sure we get this question in. So think about in the future, Kenny. You're done, right? You're at the end, and you look back. Your beautiful children and Kelly and everybody. What are you concerned your biggest regrets going to be? Oh, it's so easy. Is not taking the time right now to get away right now and have, you only have little kids for 4 or 5 years
And then, I saw something else, another thing the other day, that you're only their favorite person for like 10 years. And then they have best friends, and then they have sleepovers, and then they want to, they get married and go off and all this. And like that terrifies me. There it is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried I'm going to fail at right now. And that's why we're doing some of the things we're doing, is just trying to figure out, we've got to stop that. We've got to stop it now.
Yeah.
We've got one that's almost 5. How'd that happen? We've got a third one that's just turned 1.
Yeah.
When?
Yeah. It about broke my heart. My youngest one is 11, and he and I are thick as thieves. We're buddies, right? Coaches baseball, and we're just together all the time. And he walked up the other day and grabbed my hand, and we were just walking, right? Yeah. And I was like, this could be the last one.
That's right.
Right. Like this
because
like,
there will be a last one.
I recognized it in the moment, because I was like, he's 11, almost 12. I'm like, this might be it,
That's right.
And like, I didn't want to let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now to, I know y'all have made some changes. What are you doing now to try to wire around that?
Right now, we're trying to hire people. We're trying to hire people, and we're trying to get out of the 80%, stick to the 20%. I mean, and it's funny, in the last few months, all of a sudden, I think it's the maturity and experience. All of a sudden, I feel much better about getting rid of that 80%. And it's always been really hard for me. I like to control things. I like to be in charge. Yep. All of a sudden, that's getting way easier. And so that's the big thing we're doing, that and really just trying to be present. It's hard to be present when you've got all these things in the background, So trying to get rid of those things in the background, trying to really be purposeful about what we do and when we do it.
Yeah. And I'm proud of y'all for doing that. I've seen that show up. Kenny, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or want to reach out to learn more about you and Kelly and y'all's life, how would they reach you?
You can find us on all social media platforms, Sallis Realty Group. That's probably the best way. Phone numbers are on there, emails are on there, all that kind of stuff.
Lebanon, Tennessee, guys, about 20 minutes east of Nashville. I'm sure they would love your referrals and love to just build a relationship and network with you guys. Guys, we hope you're enjoying the podcast. We hope that you'll continue to stick with us, share it with friends, let others know it's available on all of your favorite podcast channels. Please like it, share, subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.